Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and man, I'm really starting to dread recording these intros. I find it harder and harder to hold my shit together when talking about what's going on with my wife. If you're new or haven't heard the show in a while, the really short history of what's going on is this. My wife Ange was cleared of her stage 3 colon cancer last May, and in August we found out it's back and it's stage 4 this time. She had a major surgery a couple weeks ago, but they couldn't get all of the cancer, and that was so disappointing. So we've been playing the waiting game while Ange healed, and we finally went back to the doctor this week. What we know is that there's one more good chemo option left before we need to look into trials. So Ange is going to start chemo again next week, and I'm so upset for her. While I don't want to go into it, chemo sucks, and I'm not looking forward to watching her suffer through all of this all over again. Hopefully it works out this time, as last time it shrunk the tumors, but they were able to grow back. And my wife, she's only 41 years old. We have a 14-year-old, and we're living scared right now. And we can't get away from these daily reminders of our situation. And the reminders aren't cool, obviously. I mean, this week we lost Rob Gaffney, a legend in the sport of skiing, a dad, a husband, a champion of all things good in Tahoe. A guy I really should have had on my podcast. As I look at my job as creating the living history of people in the sports we love, and I'm really disappointed in myself for not having Rob on. I'm sorry for the whole Gaffney family. I know how difficult life must have been for the past few years. And then the whole month of October is going to be a daily reminder that cancer is around us. It's just going to be people talking about boobs and not butts, and we're dealing with colon cancer, and that is something that needs attention too. So there's that. And really, cancer fucking sucks, just like every life-altering thing can suck. But if you come out on the other side, everything changes and it can be a positive thing. While my guest this week didn't have an illness, a major car accident almost took everything away from Colby Stevenson. While I could get into the details in the intro of his accident and how he had 40 fractures in his skull, I won't, because this one is so interesting and heavy, and Colby was able to recover and develop into one of the best slopestyle competitors on the planet. Before I get into Colby's story, I want to thank you for all the love you send on messages and calls. While it's sometimes sad to me, it really does mean a lot. I also want you to tell a friend about the show. It really does help things grow. And finally, I only work with the best brands in snow, and I really want you to listen to their ads and buy their products so they keep supporting me. Those brands are Elon Skis, Outdoor Research, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Stanley, Best Day Brewing, and Rollerblade. Now, let's talk to Colby Stevenson. This podcast is the story of almost 2 different lives, and while they are similar, the pre-injury Colby and the post-injury Colby are different people. But before we jump into your story, one thing that everybody says about you, and I talk to a bunch of people, is that you have so much energy, like more than anybody else. Can you describe that?
That's awesome. Yeah, I think if I'm doing something fun, I don't get as tired. I just am so immersed in what I'm doing that I think I just want to keep doing it, and then that's why a lot of days in the summer, I'll try to do the trifecta, which is 3 different activities in a day, just because, while it's sunny outside, you're out enjoying it and my mind is active and just getting after it. But I don't know. I think my mom's like that a little bit too. We call her the Energizer Bunny. She's a flight attendant, so she works crazy hours internationally. And then she's always going on runs and biking, skiing, and just needs to get that exercise in. And yeah, I find if I don't get out and exercise in a day, or even 2 days in a row of me just chilling, maybe when I'm injured, I start to get, a little depressed and just kind of thinking in a different way. And I'm just not myself when I'm not out moving around.
Is it also an ADD thing? Because I was talking to Ashley Battersby, and she said that she babysitted you once, and right at bedtime, the first time she babysitted you and the only time she babysitted you, you tried to do a gainer from a loft to your bed, and you came up almost not making it, and it scared the shit out of her, and she's not sure if she wants kids today. And whenever she would bring you up in a story, it seemed like you were the daredevil type kid. And were you always getting banged up because you were jumping off shit when you were a kid?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was getting away with it more. So I think I didn't have any injuries doing that kind of stuff. But dude, it was insane. I would say when I was 8, I was doing backflips off stuff 10 feet high even to flat ground all the time. It was insane.
Did people look at your parents like, what are you doing with this kid? Why are you letting him do this stuff? Or your parents get mad at you for doing that?
Definitely. Sometimes they would, but my parents never really stopped me. They never told me maybe I shouldn't jump off as much stuff because like later in life I might feel it, or I'd go have a play date with a friend or something, and then their mom would call me like, you have to come get him. Like he's jumping off the second story onto the couch. It's like scaring the shit out of the other parents. I got kicked out of preschool for jumping off the playground. I mean, dude, I've always been like that. I don't know, just a little psycho. And obviously chilled out a bit now with my age, but I kind of take it out, when I'm skiing and stuff and get it all out of me.
So you say you chilled out a bit, but part of chilling out could be where we're going to go next with the podcast. Because I usually start things off with your childhood, and I'm going to start this one out in the middle of your story, which I never do. So you're 18, you're an up-and-coming pro skier who's just attended the final iteration of one of the cooler underground event, photo shoot, video shoots of a different era, the West Coast Sessions at Timberline. Can you describe that event and who was there?
Yeah, for sure. It is basically just a meetup of all the people that are, free ride, park skiing, backcountry, street skiers. And we all just got together in Mount Hood, Oregon. And there was 10 installments. This was the last year of it. And yeah, we all just had like a session, a different day on a different feature. Like maybe it was the whole rail park at Timberline. One day it was like the big air jump. Other days it would be like a certain rail feature we'd all session. And yeah, year to year it just differed because obviously the park was different and stuff. And then we would team up and like make these edits. Yeah, we'd all just like have an insane session. And at the end of the week, some of the videos would win awards, and then riders would win stuff. Like I came out with MVP and best trick from like this rail trick I did on this down flat down to S. Yeah, man, it was such an amazing trip. And yeah, learned a triple cork on that big jump there. It was definitely one of the bigger jumps I've hit even to this day. And yeah, like one of my buddies, John Michael Fabrizi, like broke his leg, tore his ACL in the same leg, and was kind of looking for someone to drive him home. And I saw an opportunity to get home, and that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, let's slow down a little bit because you end up getting MVP at that event, which is a really, really big deal. I mean, this event, like you said, has been going on for a decade, and it's one of those things at the end of the season that everybody kind of looks forward to. And you get your triple cork 14 there. And this isn't a podcast. We're going to break down a triple cork 14, but that is totally insane. So you're with all your best friends down at Hood and all the dudes that even if you're not best friends with them, they're like dudes that you want to be friends with because you're all doing the same shit and seeing each other in videos. And when you guys get together at the end of the day, what does a celebration look like at that time? Even though you guys are underage, is there a celebration every night in those early days? Because that was like the fun days of skiing before it became train.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was like this huge celebration down at Wendell's camp, which they say is the slogan's like the funnest place on earth. There's like bike jumps and skate parks. And yeah, we were just there chilling, like having fire, like drinking beers, like bumping music. We're all just culture mashing together, just enjoying our time in Oregon and the beautiful old growth. And yeah, I mean, we were camping that whole trip too. So it was like 2 weeks out at Hood, just camping in the forest.
It's one big party with skiing during the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're there to ski, and that's what everything kind of revolves around. So, we weren't, getting too drunk or anything the nights before because we wanted to shred hard the next day. It was more just about that. So we'd ski so hard and then come back and celebrate. And it's like, yeah, it was never a time when we had all those people together in one place. And it was really influential time for us in the ski industry and like for us to all bond together and share the same passion. And I think, we do look for more events like that. And we see some of that with like Kimbo Session, and it's just hard to get that many of us together,
Yeah, everybody's got so much going on during the season, but when you have 2 weeks at Hood like that, it's so much fun and you're really progressing the sport. And I like to think about the off the snow stuff as well, because there's plenty of podcasts where people can talk about tricks. That's not really what this podcast does, although we do it a little bit. But back in the day, pre-injury, that guacamole Sundays was something that you were familiar with. Is it still something that's part of your lifestyle? And do you even know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like 4x9 kind of just started this video series called Guacamole Sundays, Guacamole Fridays. They would just post these hilarious videos that were, a little less on the serious side and more just showing the fun of our culture and our sport. It was always really entertaining because like our younger friends would get cameos in the video. And I remember specifically like my homie Jack Graham was dressed up for Gaper Day and he had like swim goggles on and like a robe. And he was like, Guacamole Fridays. And like he was the intro for all the Guacamole Fridays videos. And at that time we were like, I don't know, like guacamole. And then guac obviously became like that was like a code word for it.
For sure. That's kind of what I was talking about, because it seemed like back then it was more of a cloud of smoke lifestyle, and it seems like that's changed, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on like how serious you want to be with it, and smoking weed doesn't always mean it's not serious. But when we're competing in the Olympics and at these other World Cup events and stuff, like we do get tested for THC, and yeah, it's just like depending on how it works for you. Like personally, I don't get more motivated when I do that stuff. So yeah, stay on the more serious side. And yeah, man, it's cool to see like the evolution of the sport, and it is pretty crazy like how much the Olympics have influenced it becoming more of like this serious, like you have to train a lot kind of thing. But that's also just going with the progression of all the tricks, like in order to stay healthy through the season and have the strength to even do these huge tricks, you have to train in the off season and be healthy, eat right, sleep a ton. Like you can't necessarily live that rock star lifestyle anymore and also maintain your body through the whole season. I mean, to some degree you can, like everything in moderation, they say, right? So you got to celebrate too, in those right moments. It's definitely an important thing, but yeah, it's definitely not like the 4x9 days, man, when Wallisch was winning everything. And yeah,
it was a different world.
Yeah.
Back to the West Coast sessions, it's safe to say that you're skiing better than you ever have, and your confidence is at an all-time high. And thinking about back then, stage 1 of your life, I heard the word cocky to describe you a lot. And that's all hearsay because I didn't know you as cocky, I just kind of heard about you. But how would you describe your pre-accident self? Were you a lot more cocky than you are today?
Like as a little kid, I was pretty cocky, and then I like in my head I was cocky, but I would never like say that to people, like I knew I was like one of the best out with my tricks and stuff. And that was like kind of what was holding me back from doing well in contests, is like I had this expectation for myself to like win because I knew I had the tricks to do it, but like it was holding me back because I was, maybe thinking of myself differently than other people. Like, yeah, at that West Coast session specifically, like I was at the height of my skiing. Like I remember feeling like I could do any trick that I wanted to, like in my head. Like I learned Dumb Misty 12 there. Like I never tried it on anything, and I just ripped one and it worked. And
just first try?
Yeah, just first try. I was just like, damn, like I could really just like visualize a trick and like go for it. And I had an injury, like a major injury, and a long time. I remember being like, damn, like I feel like pretty invincible right now. And that's just kind of like how crazy it was, because all of a sudden, boom, I'm human. I'm nearly dead in the hospital. My head caved in, and then basically had to have an ego death and like kind of remap the way I think and like the way I look at the world and the way my place in the world, and have this new appreciation for other people. Cause like as I'm going to speech therapy and like physical therapy and all these like rehabilitation centers, I'm seeing all these people that are in a much worse place than I am. Like my injury was very severe, but I never lost my ability to walk or like talk, or I just would go in and see these people and just be like, holy crap, man, that could be me. And I just like this new empathy for other people because of that. And I think that did affect my personality a lot. And, I was pretty depressed at that time too, because I thought I was done skiing. Like, I didn't think I was ever going to get back to the level I was at West Coast Sessions. I was just like, damn, like my neck was all messed up and my equilibrium, like I would like lay down and like turn my head and everything would start spinning because of my inner ear. Like the crystals in my inner ear were out of balance, not in alignment. And I didn't find that out till later, obviously, but it was just all these things. Yeah.
Let's let everybody know what happened. So you're at the West Coast Sessions. This thing's kind of winding down, and everything in your life is pointed in a direction for ski superstardom. And the week has gone by perfect for you, but your buddy, John Michael Fabrizi, it sucks for him. He breaks his leg, he blows his knee, and you're like, I'll drive your truck back to Utah. And it's a long drive, you guys are worked, and instead of you taking the free hotel room that your dad was offering, you're like, I'm just going to power through it. And you fall asleep behind the wheel, you flip your truck. You don't remember shit, but John Michael manages to get out with a broken leg and a blown knee and flag down a car. And from what you hear, did that action save your life?
Yeah, for sure. Like I was thinking if John Michael was knocked out like me or whatever, we were rolled off the road, like kind of hard to see, like down a little bank, I guess. And yeah, he definitely saved my life by, waving down a car. Like it took a few cars to even stop because it just looked like this guy like waving with his cast and his knee brace, just trying to stop cars.
Like a crazy man.
Yeah. Someone finally stopped and then an ambulance came and I was only knocked out for like 5 minutes and then I was all combative and stuff. Like when they tried to strap me down, like I guess I was in fight or flight because my head was all ripped open and I was like trying to fight they were trying to strap me down and I was like punching them and stuff. And like they had to put adrenaline in me. And it's normally like a half a dose, like a half a syringe of adrenaline. It took like 2.5 full syringes to put me down because like I think my body was just releasing so much adrenaline. Like I was pretty much, yeah. If I hadn't been taken care of with a medical provider within maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of when I did, I for sure would have bled out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, your injuries sound bad for me sitting here at a desk, but for you as a skier, I mean, they're awful. It's a broken neck, a fractured skull in like 40 some odd pieces. Your ribs are fucked, your eye socket. And from what I hear, the diagnosis is there's a 99% chance of brain damage. And do they tell you and your folks that you're never going to be the same?
Well, yeah. Well, so I was in a coma for a bit and they didn't know what the result was going to be when I woke up. So they were just like, yeah, like, we'll see. We're going to bring him out of the sedation here and you can try to talk to him. And then, yeah, like the first thing I said was like, I looked at my mom and my stepdad. They were in a trip to Hawaii for their honeymoon, I remember. And I looked at them and I was like, sorry, I had to ruin your guys' trip to Hawaii or something.
That had to at least give them the hope that you had a memory of that you did that.
For sure. Or like, say they had told me that and then I like said it to them or whatever. And I was like acting more like myself than they expected. Like I never really like lost my personality. I guess that part of my brain wasn't damaged. It was more like decision making and some memory loss stuff that affected me a little more long term. But overall, I didn't have any permanent brain damage based on however they measure that. So my brain swelled to 8 millimeters, and at 9 millimeters is where brain damage starts. So it swelled to 8 millimeters and then went back down. And yeah, I guess it was like all the fractures kind of were able to relieve the blood out of my brain. You know, sometimes like if someone has a bad brain injury, they'll cut a hole in your skull and like so the blood can kind of
for pressure
get outside. Yeah. So mine was able to do that on its own because all the fractures. And so my head swelled up like the size of a watermelon. So people looked at me and like they didn't even recognize me. Like some of my friends that came in the hospital were pretty messed up from looking at me, but I didn't fucking know. I was all drugged up, dude. It was gnarly. I was on heavy drugs for, I want to say 2 or 3 months straight. Every 4 hours I had to have it.
Otherwise,
I couldn't live or sleep.
Were you in the hospital for 3 months?
No, so I was only in the hospital for 2 weeks. They thought I was going to be in there for 2 months. And then after 2 weeks, like I was pretty stable. So I got to go home and just suffer there. We moved the bed into the living room. So I got to stay on the one level. And, you know, my mom took some work off to cook for me and take care of me because it was gnarly. Like I had to get up middle of the night every night and eat oatmeal and a painkiller to like make it through the night, you know?
So the pain was just like at a 10 at all times?
Yeah, it was just like, imagine like a broken bone, but it's just like your whole head.
Ugh.
And then after that, it was like, you know, my neck super messed up because I had atrophy and stuff. So I couldn't even like sit and eat a meal at the table without like my neck just killing. So I would like get like a few bites into my meal and then like go lay down for a sec and then come back up, get a few bites of the meal, lay down.
And you're talking.
Yeah.
And do you eventually ask the doctors like, hey, am I ever going to be able to do the things that I used to do again? And what did they tell you?
Yeah, for sure. It was kind of funny because like no one had a straight answer for me until this one guy who I went to, who's the one that actually pieced my skull back together. And I came in and I was talking to him, asking all these questions, and he's sitting there like his eyes are bright as hell. He's like, can't believe that I'm, you know, as in good condition as I am. And I'm telling him, yeah, it's not like I'm a pro skier, man. Like, how do I get back to this? Like, da-da-da. And he's like, yeah, I mean, your skull's going to heal stronger than it ever did. So I don't see why you can't. But, you know, you don't want to rush back into it, da-da-da. Like, it pretty much was like I was my own doctor for diagnosing where I was at because no one knew how I actually felt. So it was more just like, well, if you think you can. I seriously didn't have that much guidance from doctors. It was more just like, all right, like, don't fall again.
That sounds like a good thing, though.
I mean, it was. I didn't have anyone saying, yeah, like at the beginning they said he might not ever ski again. But then after I was like starting to recover and stuff, it was like, well, I don't see why not. Like the skull should heal strong.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Elon skis. I know everyone has seen more and more Elon skis on the mountain, as their award-winning ripstick models have a lot of people talking about the brand, and more importantly, skiing better and having more fun. Now everyone can enjoy the superior materials and craftsmanship that Elan delivers, and that's no exaggeration for this ad. Elan skis are made by skiers in the Slovenian Alps, in a factory so technologically advanced that I don't have enough time to describe it all. And the materials themselves? Well, Elan makes yachts, which means they only use the best of the best materials, so now everyone can have the best of the best. Because while everyone skiing has been moving forward with ripstick models over the past few years, those who've wanted to land switch now have a couple insanely light and lively twin-tip options for the Park and the POW, with the soon-to-be award-winning Playmaker 91 and 101 models. To find out about all things Elan, especially those new Playmaker 91 and 101 models, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up is Seattle's own Outdoor Research. They've been supporting the podcast for almost 5 seasons, but you know what? I've been wearing their gear long before they bought ads because they make hands down the warmest, most waterproof gear I've ever purchased. There's something to be said for going out into the elements knowing you're going to be drier and warmer than everyone else because you're rocking gear made with the best materials that were tested in the brutal elements of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, for decades, OR has been the one-stop shop for mountaineers climbing 7,000-meter peaks because those life or death situations should always be outfitted with the best gear. But that's only a small part of what they do. Over the past few seasons, OR designers have been working with OR ambassadors like backcountry skier Mark Abma, world champion Troy Podmilsack, X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, and snowboarder Neil Provo to create baggier fits and styles that turn heads and have people saying, wow, that's an Outdoor Research jacket? This season, I'll be rocking the freeride fit of the Snow Crew A Norak, and on the colder days, you'll find me on the lightly insulated Tungsten 2. I'm dialed in for the season with outerwear. Now it's your turn. To find out all the latest and greatest, head on over to outdoorresearch.com to see the new website with all the new gear on it. Closing things out is the place where I want you to buy all of your ski and snowboard gear from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Why support Peter Glenn Ski and Sports? Well, first and foremost, they're the little guy who's been getting people on snow for over 65 years. They're not trying to take over an industry by making a ton of branded products that compete with established brands. They aren't trying to get you to stay at their hotels or go on one of their vacations. Peter Glenn is all about having all the brands, all the products, and all the deals both in-store and online. It's not about algorithms or AI. Peter Glenn is about having the most knowledgeable staff that understands what you need to make sure you have the most fun possible wherever you're going. And they've been doing that since 1958. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or if you need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is your one-stop shop, and they offer free shipping on orders of over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy all your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When did they realize in the hospital that you are that 1%? Because, I mean, when there's a 99% chance of brain damage, it's like no one gives you a chance at all, I would think. And then do you see it in the doctor's faces and everyone's face at some point? Like, holy shit, this kid's back to normal.
I don't know, man. I think it was just like after that swelling in my head came down and stuff. I mean, I can't really tell you exactly those moments because, like, it's all a blur a bit because of how many drugs I was on.
Sure.
But, like, I know that it was just a miracle altogether. And people with that type of skull fracture usually have brain damage. So it was just, yeah, by the grace of God or something like that. And, you know, I was never that religious before, but, like, after that, I kind of just started to believe in a higher power for sure. And just, like, I like to think I got some angels helping me out a little bit. And a lot of people in my life I see as angels, you know, like some family and friends. And it takes a team to do it, you know, and, like, if I didn't have those people to, like, rely on to, like, help me through it, I definitely wouldn't have came out. You know, my mom was, like, lying to me, like, telling me, oh, like, it's all good. Like, even though like my skull was showing for like a month before I had my second surgery. Like, I just had a big piece of my forehead, like, missing. And yeah, it was just like every day she had to, like, suck it up and act like it wasn't a big deal while we redressed it and stuff.
I can't even imagine that as a parent.
Yeah, man. It came down to just, yeah, like a lot of moving parts. And then, yeah, believing in a higher power gave me hope that there's a reason for me to still be alive. And, like, it makes me want to help other people. It makes me want to try to tell those kids that maybe are in a position that I was in before the accident, the things to focus on, you know, like just being grateful. Yeah, rather than all this other stuff.
It's amazing how injuries like this, because I'm friends with Roy Tuscany and I talk to him a lot about just different injuries and things. And when people have TBIs, it's amazing how they're one person before they have the TBI and they're another person afterwards. I mean, I think of CR, and I had met him before he was injured, and he was a lot more cocky than when I met him after. He was just such an awesome dude. Not that he wasn't beforehand, but he was a different awesome dude. And it's amazing how your priorities and everything in life kind of come together when everything's almost taken away from you. And it sounds like that's happened to you, which is amazing. But that's mentally. But physically, your face is pretty mangled. I mean, your mom had to deal with looking at your exposed forehead for a long time. Do they have to do a bunch of plastic surgeries to fix it? And will you always have a scar to remind you of what happened?
Yeah, for sure. And that was definitely like one of the harder parts about the whole recovery is like every day I looked in the mirror, I just was like, what the fuck did I do to myself, man? I looked like a zombie. Yeah, it was really hard to sit with that. And so after I went in like a month later after my first surgery, it was like a month or two even from the crash, there was still asphalt and stuff up in my head that was kind of like draining. So my body was trying to get that out. So it was like draining all this fluid out of my scar in the front. And then that's why it opened up again. And so I went in for this second surgery and they were like, well, there's two different things we can do here. One of them has like an 80% chance of working, but it's not going to look as good because we put either fake skin or cadaver skin there and it will be a different color. Or there's this other procedure that's more risky that has like a 50% chance of working out. And that's where we just like cut open your scalp behind your ear and then we peel it all back and then we're able to stretch your skin and your forehead back together and sew it shut after we clean your skull and stuff. And that one will be your own skin and it might be a little tight because I lost about a quarter size skin there. And so I went with that one because it just sounded better and it went well. So yeah, I got my own skin there and the skin on my forehead doesn't really move because it's kind of glued to the skull. But yeah, I got a big scar here. I got to live with it for the rest of my life and I'm just rocking it. People are like, you got tattoos? I'm like, no, I got a lot of scars though. Tell some stories.
You're like Nick Cage in Face Off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like fucking Scarface over here.
I just meant the surgery part of like they had to pull down his scalp and pull up the skin. I wasn't talking about your scar. That would be rude of me to say anything about your scar.
Oh yeah, it's all good.
But my final injury question for you is it true that the injury causes you to lose an inch? And then are there side effects from the injury that you still experience?
Yeah, so I was 6'2", and then after the crash, I was 6'1", and now I'm like 6'1.5". So I've gained a half inch back. But yeah, it's kind of gnarly just because the roof of the car kind of just crunched my head like an accordion, like getting smushed down. So I'm super lucky, man. I'm lucky to even walk. So definitely looking at it like that rather than anything else. But yeah, I guess to this day, I mean, I've still had issues with my neck, like not being as strong as it used to be. And, you know, when I eat shit in the backcountry or sometimes in the park, even like I'll get some bad whiplash, but I've had it like probably 10 times in the 7 years since my crash. I've probably whiplashed at least 10 times and I've recovered from it. But yeah, man, I think like all the mountain biking and moto, like those are some really good PTs for my neck and my shoulders, you know, holding that heavy helmet up over all the bumps. And I ride a lot of enduro and moto. So that's like a big thing for me to stay active and keep my neck strong. And then I don't know, man. Yeah. Like I've got other issues for sure. Like my attention is very one directional. Like you said, I'm super ADD and stuff, but like it can be a really good thing. My attention is in one dimension. Like if I'm focusing on a TV or something, I can't hear anybody talking to me, even if they're right next to me, you know? And I know there's a lot of other people like that too, but I don't know if it's heightened since my crash because it's crazy. I'm very like one focus. Like I cannot multitask very well.
That has to help you with your skiing though. When you want to get one trick, I would think that everything else is phased out and you're just laser focused on that trick until you get it.
Yeah. And like in a competition, like you really want to focus all your energy into the moment and like the tricks ahead of you and like kind of block out all other thoughts. So, you know, as long as I'm able to do that, it works really well. But like if I get fixated on a certain thought, then it's hard to shake that too, you know?
Yeah.
You just really want to make sure your focus is in the right place. And if you use it in the right way, it could be a good thing and help you achieve great things. And, you know, my memory is definitely not as good as it used to be. Weirdly enough, like I couldn't think of big words or like, you know, it'd be right on the tip of my tongue, but I just couldn't grasp it, you know? And like, I'd look at a friend, one of my friends that I've known forever, and I like couldn't think of his name. Like it was
That's crazy.
Like something like that. That's just like, yeah, it was like scary because I'm like, no way. And then after I had COVID in 2020, like I had this whole like resurgence of memory loss. I didn't know why. And then my dad like sent me this study they did on the COVID, like long-term effects of like memory loss and stuff. And I think it was because of that. I was like worried I was going to go to my neuro guy because like my memory was worse than it ever had been for like a few months there. And like I was getting really stressed out, like full of anxiety because I wasn't sure what was happening. But anyway, I came through that luckily.
Well, I'll say that's the worst part of your life right there. And I mean, there could have been worse, but I couldn't find it in my research. And that's all we're going to really talk about the injury right now, because now we're going to jump into the beginning of your life, because that's how I usually start these podcasts. And your parents went from Portsmouth, New Hampshire to Tahoe to Vermont to finally Park City. Why all the moves?
Yeah, so funny enough, my mom was the one that wanted to move west. They're both from the East Coast. You know, dad's from Connecticut, mom's from Vermont, and they just love skiing. And they both work for the airlines. They're like, wow, we should try going out west. And so they went to Tahoe, and Reno Airport's not too far away. They were able to commute out of there. And then my dad like just wanted to be back east. And I think it was around the time that his dad and my grandfather was like going through some tough medical times. I don't know. He ended up dying that year. We went back to Vermont. It was like one of my first memories. But I think, yeah, went out west, and then it was like this calling to go back east. Like we made the wrong move. And then it was back to Stowe, Vermont for a year. And then, you know, I was so young at this time. I don't know what the actual causes were, but I think it was like they went to Park City to visit people right before the 2002 Olympics. And they were like, damn, this is the place. And it's the closest mountain town to an airport. So it was only a 30-minute drive. And then they commuted from Salt Lake to San Fran, and they could just like jump on any flight. And it was worth it to them to live here. And they thought it was a great place for me. It was like so many different sports and activities to get into. And at that time, I was already pretty good at skiing and loved it. And so when I came here, I was like, all I wanted to do, like after school and stuff, I was just like, my mom would be like, what do you want to do today? And I'd be like, let's go ski. But yeah, I lucked out with them wanting to move out west for better snow and bigger mountains. And they just enabled me to kind of do everything I wanted at that point. And, you know, I was like playing soccer a lot as a kid, and they rolled me in like skate camp here at the Park City Skate Park, which was super sick. And I remember learning how to drop in and stuff, having like a little coach. And yeah, it was like pretty much the ideal place to grow up, and like started hitting the water ramps when I was 6.
Before we get into the water ramps, let's talk about your parents for a second, because you're a badass skier. And when you think about your folks, they're big time skiers as well. They've moved their family to different places based around skiing. But when you think about it, what are their athletic chops like? Were they both badass athletes when they were coming up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my dad went to military school and like as a pilot, and became an airline pilot because right after the war ended, he was finishing school. But yeah, he was always skiing growing up with his dad and stuff, and loved it. And he was also super into like wrestling and like fitness. So he was like working out a lot. And his claim to fame is like he won the Super Jock, which is like a lifting competition at military school. He went back when he was like 40, and he beat all these like 20 somethings. So like a pull up and push up contest. So he just loved being like a fit dude. And
he's a badass.
Yeah, he's a badass for sure. And then my mom was super athletic from a young age. Like she was like racing track and like jumping hurdles and stuff. And actually like blew her knee when she was like 16.
Jesus.
Yeah. And back then like surgeries weren't nearly as good as today. So she got some like jank surgery that ended up holding until this day. Like some surgeons she talks to today, they're like, you had that? And it's like, you're fine. She's like still running on it and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah. But my mom like didn't have as much ability. Like her parents wanted her to just like work on the farm in Vermont, and like all she wanted to do was ski and like play her oboe, and there's all these things she wanted to pursue but was kind of held back by her parents a bit. So they did allow her to ski, you know, at the local resort, and she obviously is like talented. And so when she had me, you know, she had my older brother first, and you know, got him skiing. He was on the race team growing up and stuff, and went to college for racing. Then they had me, and she wanted me to have those opportunities that she didn't have, you know. So if I wanted to ski, she wanted to enable that, you know. If I wanted to play soccer, she wanted to enable that, or like ice hockey. Like I started doing that when I was a kid, and like they just wanted me to have all these opportunities because they think that if you're a well-rounded athlete, maybe you'll pick one. Or I don't even know if they wanted me to be a pro athlete. They just wanted me to have a good childhood.
And the opportunities where you live, I mean, there's so many perks. I mean, you're put into a race program probably when you're like 6 years old. And that's when you end up going to the water ramps and you're like hitting the Nordic jumps. And at like 6 years old, it sounds like you learned backflips on the water ramps. And do you take that to snow the next season? Is that kind of when you're talking about being the kid that jumps off stuff and doing crazy shit? Were you flipping at like 7 years old and were you that circus kid that everybody's like, look at the little kid backflip?
Yeah, 6 years old, I did my first backflip, and I have to thank Alex Schlope because he taught me on the tramp like when I was 5. Yeah, that next winter where I was like in my race suit, like at this race competition, and I had like my Obermeyer jacket on with like my little fur hood, like over my race suit, and we built this little backcountry jump next to the course, like into POW, and it took me like, I don't know, a few tries, but that's the day I first rode away from a backflip, and I remember it was like electric. I just wanted to learn more and do more. And like, I was already skiing through the park at that time and just loved like jumping off and catching air and stuff because that just was in my blood, I guess. And by the time I was 7 or 8, I was like pretty focused on park and pipe because that's like all I wanted to do is progress at that.
Do you remember it like a moment almost in time when you build that kicker and you're flipping in your race suit? Is that kind of when skiing almost changes for you? Like racing doesn't seem as fun anymore and you want to switch totally to park and pipe and get on the freestyle team?
Yeah, I mean, like at that time, I didn't think racing was for me at all. Like we'd be racing and I'd be like just looking over at a jump on the side of the run or something. You know, it wasn't like my interest. And then I started racing with like my twin tip skis and like a puffy jacket and like the other parents of the kids would like try to get me disqualified because I was like a disgrace to the sport and like because I was like beating their kids and I was like not wearing the proper gear and they thought it was like disrespectful. And then by the time I was like 7 or 8 years old, when I was 8, I foreran for the X Games, a half pipe in Aspen. And
yeah, how the hell does that happen? Because that's like got to be the biggest deal of your life.
Yeah, Kerry Miller like got me set up in there, and I don't know if you've heard that name. You probably have. He
time out right now. Scary Kerry. Sorry, that's the wrong name to call him.
No, for sure. That's how I know him by too.
He was an interesting dude who's come up on the podcast before, but not in a long time. But he used to take young kids and take them under his wing and create opportunities for them. And while I never heard anything bad about Scary Kerry, it always just seemed weird to me.
Yeah. I don't know how much we should talk about him, but he definitely gave me a lot of opportunities as a kid. And like, he's the one that connected me with like the Wells brothers from New Zealand. Like they came and stayed with me in Park City, Bo, Byron, and Jossie. And they stayed at our house and we were skiing. And then the next summer I went down to New Zealand when I was 8 and stayed with them at their house. And we skied at like snow park and shit. Like those were like really pivotal times in my young life to like push me towards where I am today. And like, that's when I was definitely like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a pro skier, you know?
Yeah, but when you're this age, when you're 8 years old and you're traveling to New Zealand, and it's nice that you have parents that are in the airline business because I'm sure that allows you to travel anywhere you want throughout your career because tickets aren't that hard to come by when you have those perks.
Totally.
But when you're 8 years old, what's the trick vocabulary like? Do you have like 3s, 5s, 7s, and you're kind of figuring out off-axis flips and shit, and you're this little prodigy kid?
Yeah, I had cork 7s at 8 years old, which was insane. There's a photo of me like doing one like in a cannonball, like my arms like up above my head. It was on the aerial hill at the Utah Olympic Park. They had like the 7-meter jump. And yeah, that's where I learned it was like onto the chopped landing. I just learned cork 7. Let's see, I was doing backflips and I mean, I don't think I was doing more than a cork 7, you know?
No, but when you're doing that and you're this little kid who's going through the park, and at that point, Utah was like, you know, where the scene kind of shifts every once in a while, but Utah was like the place where all the pros were at that time. Wallisch is living there. You got the 4x9 crew there. Do you see all the pros going through the park and do you chase them and do eventually they want to take you under their wing because they see this little cute kid doing tricks that they're like, I don't know how this kid is doing that? Dude,
totally. It was insane growing up around all the amazing people in the industry that were here at that time and being the Grom and just, I don't even know how to like explain it, but yeah, I was.
Here's how you explain it. What's your Tom Wallisch memory? Your first important Tom Wallisch memory?
That's a good one. Yeah, my first Tom Wallisch memory, I was with my buddy Andy Partridge, who was skiing a lot with me at that time. And we were hiking like the park in Payday, which is like the 6-person lift at Park City that they don't have a park on anymore. But there was like a rail park right before King's Crown. and we were like hiking this box, and Tom comes through and he gives Andy and I a little lesson on like how to grip to do pretzels. And when I say grip, that's when you like use your edge on the side of the rail to basically change your direction of spinning so you can spin out the other direction. And yeah, he was showing us how to grip in, you know, all the different ways. It's like front side, and when you want to grip to do like, you know, back 270 or 450 out of the rail, or front side 450. And that was really crazy because like Tom was one of the first guys to make pretzels known to the world. And yeah, that's a pretzel is when you spin in to the rail one way and out of the rail the other way. And
Pretzel King of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, to learn from that guy. And like, I must have been right around that age again, 9 or 10. I can't remember exactly. Crazy times for sure.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Best Day Brewing. And with snow season right around the corner, skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowbikers, snowmobilers, you get it. The doers of winter are starting to get ready to shred. And post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, let's do après right. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about getting in trouble on the way home. Because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, you'll get all the flavor of your favorite beer, whether it be a West Coast IPA, a hazy IPA, a Kolsch, or my new favorite, the Electro Lime Circa de Cerveza, and you won't have to worry about anything but having your best day ever. Blind taste tests prove that you won't be able to taste the difference. The only difference you will notice is how good you feel in the morning. And you'll remember what you did last night, which is almost as refreshing as a best day. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day, or you can always buy some on Amazon or at bestdaybrewing.com. Next up is Stanley, the Seattle brand that has been hydrating adventures and caffeinating life for so many people since 1913. And these days, while Stanley still makes that iconic green bottle that changed the way we drink 90 years ago, these days, Stanley does so much more than that. For us skiers and snowboarders, Stanley has all the hot and cold food storage you're going to need to keep it organized and make it easy to feed your crew at lunch, whether you're in the day lodge or the parking lot. And since you listen to this podcast, and Stanley has supported it forever, they're going to give you the best deal they offer to anyone. So to get the deal, which is 30% off, head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code winteriscoming. That's all lowercase, all one word, and you'll get that deal when you check out. My final sponsor is Rollerblade, the brand that invented inline skates. Rollerblade has been keeping skiers in shape since 1980. If you've listened to this podcast and my interviews with U.S. ski teamers, all of them use Rollerblade branded skates to get where they are today. It's the only all-season sport that mimics the motion of skiing and utilizes the same muscle groups. So really, it's a no-brainer that if you want to get better on your skis, in the park or at speed or anywhere really, inline skating is going to make you better. Remember, running wrecks your knees, and biking is proven not to get your legs in ski shape. If you want to start ski season like you left off last year, download yourself Rollerblade's award-winning Skate to Ski app, pick yourself up a pair of skates, and get to work. You can thank me in early December when you're surprised your ski legs are that strong. To find out more about all things Rollerblade, head on over to rollerblade.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. How about Tanner Hall? He was a fixture in that area at that point as well, and he is blowing up in the ski world. I would think he's already blown up, and he's kind of the king of the ski world at that point. Do you see him at all in Park City?
Yeah, like he was definitely my biggest idol at that age. And, you know, after I'd watched him when I was 8 at the X Games, like just dominating, he won that year. Yeah, I'm just like, he was a total superhero for me. And then the first time I actually remember meeting him was after he broke his ankles, and he was in a wheelchair. I want to say like within a month of when he broke his ankles at Chad's Gap. He was at the Canyons getting wheeled around this little concert, and I just remember rolling up to him. I don't even remember what we said, but it was a big moment for sure, like getting to meet him and shit. And he was like, "Oh, what up, little Colby," or something, you know? Like,
he knew who you were too?
Yeah, like had known about me through Armada probably. Yeah, because I was on Armada starting when I was 8. Like they just started giving me skis. Like right as they started making little kid twin tips was like when I got on, and like I motivated them to make the JJ in a smaller size so I could ride that in the POW. You know, that definitely changed my life a bit, skiing a JJ at like 14 years old or whatever I was, maybe even a little younger, and being able to just like bounce around through POW on like these crazy rocker reverse camber POW skis.
Yeah, because there weren't any options for you for skis other than like a really skinny twin tip until they got you that JJ.
Right.
But you're talking about Tanner breaking his ankles, but the major setback in your career trajectory was at like 10 years old, you ended up breaking your heel. And talk about how that injury really affected your confidence for a couple of years, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I broke my heel on the aerial hill at the UOP, like on the 14-meter jump. Normally there's like a chopped landing, but this night it was like just groomed and had like a sharp edge on the knuckle. And yeah, I just cased it by like a foot, dude. I barely knuckled this thing and yeah, broke my heel in half. And it was like the worst pain, like almost the worst pain I can remember to this day, you know, just being a Grom and like having that. And then, yeah, it took me like a year to recover physically because it just didn't heal that well. And then, yeah, for the next like 2 or 3 seasons, I just had no confidence. I was just gun shy. I was worried about learning new tricks and getting hurt again. And yeah, it really knocked me out of the progression cycle. And then when I was 14, I finally was over that fear and was able to push through it. But, you know, it took me like 2 seasons to learn a flare in the half pipe. Like I had this mental block.
And is that all because of the heel? Just because you weren't confident in your body anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I just was like scared of getting hurt. I don't know. It was just like, it just created this like invisible mental block inside of me. And if I didn't come out of that ever, like I would not have been able to progress. And there was definitely moments I was like not as motivated to like keep going just because I was scared. Getting hurt at a young age like that, it affects you deeper than a conscious way. It's like your subconscious gets affected a bit. Yeah, and when I was 14, I finally learned a bunch of tricks. I learned dub 10, dub 12 that year.
You're learning these tricks. Things are starting to get more serious for you, especially when you get to high school, because like a lot of elite Utah athletes, you end up going to the winter sports school. And what does coaching look like at this level? And do you think you could be where you are today if you didn't have coaching?
I don't think I'd be where I am today without coaches. No way, because at every level, you need that support and that like boost of confidence from someone that has maybe done those tricks or understands it a different way and has like coached other people progressing at your level to kind of just, yeah, help guide you and stay focused. And that's the cool thing about skiing is like at every level of my growing up, it always felt the same because it was like always this next trick I wanted to learn, or like you're just so focused, you don't want to crash. And to have someone there to kind of help guide you through that was so important.
And the coaching isn't just from at school. I would think there's stuff at Hood too, where you're going to summer camp. And did you get a lot of coaching at summer camp that really helped progress you, and Access Freeride and a bunch of different places that really took you to where you are today?
Yeah, having Access Freeride and like a lot of the 4x9 guys were coaching at that time, kind of filling in when they could to make some extra money and give back to the youth. And then out in Hood, it was Wendell's. I remember going out there for the first time. I had Adam DeLorme as my coach, and he was like my favorite skier just because he had some crazy style and like, you know, creative way of attacking whatever he was riding. And then Brady Perrin, like the next time I went, was my coach, which was super dope. He's like style god for sure, and definitely watched a lot of his videos. He's in a lot of 4x9 stuff. And no, just so cool to have a sport where you got the pros like giving back to the youth, and like you don't get that in all the sports. Yeah, I think we have a really good connection of, you know, the pros and the AMs in this sport, and definitely helped me and motivated me to get better, you know. And yeah, going to winter school was super clutch. Just go to school all summer and like between water amps and stuff, and then boom, having all winter to travel around and be stress free was a big change for me. Like, you know, I didn't even make it through 8th grade because I started traveling a lot, and I came back after like the quarter had finished and I went to submit all this work, and they're like, oh, we can't accept this. Like the quarter's over. Like the grades are final. Yeah. I don't know. I failed my second quarter of 8th grade, and then the winter school was like, oh yeah, like it's all good. You can just come start here in a few months and you don't need 8th grade. And I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. But it would have been such a stressful challenge to be traveling and all that stuff and going to school all winter too. It wouldn't have worked. You know, I'm definitely super fortunate to have had that opportunity. And like, there was only 100 people in the winter school when I graduated, and like only like 30 people in my class. And when I started, there was only 9 people in my class.
Whoa.
As a freshman. Yeah, it was nuts, dude. Yeah, the school was tiny. It was up in these trailers in the Utah Olympic Park. But, you know, what a cool program. Like one of the only in the country that has that schedule where you go all summer. And yeah, I just happened to be right in the place where I live and Pretty crazy, man. I've been very fortunate living here because when I got on the U.S. team at 15 on the rookie team, we have the headquarters right here. It has like a world-class gym and super tramp and skate ramps and foam pit and stuff. So I just had all these crazy training facilities at my fingertips, essentially.
To make that rookie team, it's through competition experience, and you get a lot of experience because you're able to travel everywhere. I mean, with the winter school schedule that allows you to travel everywhere, along with the coaching that you're getting, along with the free plane tickets that your parents are able to get you, you're able to go everywhere. And I would think that there's no FOMO syndrome for you because you're able to be at all these contests and you don't have to miss any. So in 2013 alone, you end up with 9 top 5 finishes at different events. That's insane. Is this around the time that you realized that, holy shit, I might be able to be a pro skier with my life?
I'm guessing you're talking about
it was like the Rev Tour year.
Rev Tours and stuff. Yeah. I was winning a bunch of those and was definitely super motivated to get to that next level. But yeah, I'd already committed to hopefully being a pro skier since I was really young. And so, yeah, just kind of staying on that path and, end goal, just getting better and better always was kind of the plan.
So you're on Armada.
Yeah, I was on Armada until I was 16, and then K2 came in the picture and offered me a little money. So hopped on that train and super grateful they were able to support me because I needed it at that time. And yeah, I want to touch on my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old. So my mom didn't make as much money as my dad. So he had to start paying alimony to her. And then, my dad was basically I'm not going to pay for Colby skiing. Just wasn't working for him. He lost a lot of money in the 2008 crash and he didn't feel like it was the right thing to invest in at the moment. And my mom was getting that alimony and basically putting all of it into my ski career and was really stressful for her because she was barely making ends meet. And it was amazing sacrifice that she made.
Did it make things weird between you, your mom, and your dad?
No, between us, it was pretty chill. They would still at least be able to talk to each other when they saw each other. I mean, sometimes they would fight, but not very often. And I would still split time between them. And, I'd more so stay with my mom, but they were both working a lot still too. My mom's a flight attendant, dad's a pilot. So they try to plan their trips. 1 week I was with one of them and then they would leave and then I would be the other one the next week kind of thing and switch back and forth. But man, if I didn't have the flight hookup, there's no way I would have been able to go to all these competitions and stuff because I was flying standby. Whereas other athletes, are paying $10 grand a season and just flights, at least. And so that on top of the programs, to have the coaches and then the entry fee for the events. And luckily I was getting all my gear for free, but there's just so much that goes into it. Yeah. I just can't thank my mom enough for sacrificing during those tough times when we didn't really have the means to do it, but just did it anyway. And she just believed in me and believed in my dreams. And like I said, she didn't have that opportunity as a kid. Her parents kind of stopped her from pursuing her dreams. So she really wanted to make sure that didn't happen for me. And clearly it was the right call. And she allowed me to just keep pushing, even through those injuries and stuff. She just always had my back and would help give advice and stuff. Same with my dad too. He was still in the picture a lot, but just couldn't help financially for a big portion of that time.
So the free skis that you're getting from Armada are a big deal. Who else is hooking you up with product at that point? Because, by the time you're 13 and you're winning all these contests, you're doing really well at the Rev Tour. I'm sure other people are jumping on the Colby bandwagon. Who else is hooking you up?
Yeah, at that time, it was mostly just free gear. But when I was 12, Oakley started giving me goggles, which was a big deal to me. Obviously, I thought were the best ones to be on at the time, the Crowbar and stuff. And the Wisdoms. At that time, Oakley was pushing. Who else was giving me stuff? Yeah, I was getting Del Bello boots for a bit, and then it was full tilt, and then Oakley head to toe, some Armada outerwear too, and then when I was even younger, it was Scott was giving me stuff and Giro.
So you always had the hookup, so gear was never really a problem.
Yeah, gear was never an issue, which was super lucky, and even just getting free gear at that age feels like so much support.
Yeah, and then there's the cool factor. I mean, you were on Armada at a time when, it's Henrik, B-Dog, Tanner. I mean, everybody's on Armada at that point, and it's just got to feel like a dream come true being on that program. Did they make you feel included, or was it more that just they sent you gear?
I would say I was pretty young, and so I don't know if I was that included, but around the time when I was making that switch to K2, they brought Torin on and brought him that trip to New Zealand. I remember being super jealous because I'd been wanting something like that from Armada, and I mean, obviously Torrin was a freak of nature and probably better than I was at that time. But it was sick to see him get kind of taken under the wing by Team Armada. And I never got to go on a trip like that with the squad at a young age, but it ended up working out for me with K2, and they helped me out a lot. And I went on, K2 spring training camp to Hood. Like, we all went out there and stayed at the K2 house and like did these photo shoots and stuff, and like got to try out like all these old classic skis that they had in the vault that were
they brought the straight skis. I remember that. I was like, what are you thinking,
so
Doliak? You're going to put those dudes on straight skis? They don't even know how to turn them.
Yeah, and I did like a dub 10 on like some 190 like AK enemies. And they let me keep them and shit, and it was sick.
And AK Enemy was like at least a little bit more modern than some of the other stuff that you guys had.
Definitely, yeah. I never rode the straight skis, but I got to ride those. Those were a 2001 skis. So yeah, they had like side cut and, wider tip and a little bit of twin tip so you could actually go backwards. I was doing like switch nines on like the 60-foot jump we had with them instead. It was hilarious. They were so far back mounted too. It was crazy. But no, so cool that they were able to keep some of those skis and let us ride them and try it out. And no, man, I cannot complain about a single thing. Like, I was so fortunate having Armada support me from 8 to 16, and then K2 stepping in, giving me some money as a kid. I didn't have like a ton of accolades at that time, but yeah, I was like winning rev tours and stuff, and they put the investment in me early on, and it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough for me to just like feel appreciated. And then yeah, obviously the more success I had, it worked out. But yeah, crazy enough, like I never got a World Cup podium until after my car accident,
I know, which is crazy. And we've gotten to a point in the podcast where we're almost towards the end, and your story is like only halfway through. We haven't really gotten to like the big success of your career. We're kind of working our way up to that. And are you cool with doing a part 2 next week?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we will do that, and we'll get to K2 and all that in the next podcast. But here I want to talk about the people that really influenced you when you were growing up, because you were one of those kids that skied everything. And back then, that's what people did. They did everything. And when you think about influences, who was your favorite park rider back then and even now? If you have to pick 2, who did you like when you were a kid and who do you like to watch now?
Man, it's really hard to put it all on one person. And like, definitely, like I said, Tanner Hall and like his dominance and stuff and pushing the sport in this new direction of slopestyle and big air, stuff like that. He definitely had the biggest influence on me, and like watching him take his stuff to the backcountry as well. But man, I was getting influence from like Shane McConkey, like Seth Morrison, like Candide Thovex, watching him do that huge cork 5 in Mammoth. Those were the kind of videos I would watch. And like, I'd see them in those movies and just be like, what the hell? Like, that is exactly what I want to be doing. And pushing the sport, and bringing it to the big mountains, and, C.R. Johnson, Sammy Carlson, the list goes on and on. Like, it's so hard to put it all on one person, but like, yeah, growing up watching all those Matchstick Productions movies and Level 1.
Well, let's break it out like this. How about pipe? Who's your favorite pipe rider of all time? If you have to pick one and someone's got a gun to your head.
Obviously, watching Simon and Tanner battle it out when I was a kid, that was the craziest shit to watch. But then there's people like Duncan Adams that come in the pipe and doing just like huge zero spins, straight airs, and just riding the pipe in a different way. And then you got people like Torrin that come in and they're just recklessly boosting 20 feet out every hit.
Yeah.
And like getting one less hit than everyone else, but going like another 10 feet higher. It was just, I don't know, man. It's so hard to put it on one person for me, because I never was like infatuated by just one so much to where I wasn't watching everyone else,
Okay, so we're going to leave those guys that you just said. We'll say those are your guys. I think there's like 3 of them in there. How about your backcountry rider? Whose segments do you like watching the most?
It depends on when we're talking, like we've got Parker White and Chris Logan, like, in the big picture and stuff.
They're so fun.
I really loved watching those videos. And yeah, they're obviously ski with a lot of strength, and yeah, they're bosses. But yeah, like T Hall bringing his shit up to Canada, skiing some pillow lines and stuff. That was always really fun to watch for me. And Sammy Carlson, when he stopped skiing slopestyle and really focused on the film side, and then won the X Games real snow, and all those videos were super dope. And then Candide just skiing with such fluidity and dominating, the Freeride World Tour and stuff. And coming from a park background, like, those are all very notable people for me, and that I definitely took influence from, and was just like stoked to watch them ride whenever I could.
All right, and then let's think about the urban skiers. What do you think about the street skiers out there? Who kind of catches your eye there or has over the years?
Definitely Wallisch comes to the top of the list for me. He, with his level 1 segments and some of the 4x9 shit, he just was doing tricks that no one else was doing and super consistent. And yeah, he'd like do 270 into like these 8 kink rails, and you're just like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
And you never know how hard that stuff is until you're actually hitting these spots and like crashing on the stairs and falling on the concrete or, getting kicked out by the cops. Yeah. And Henrik at a young age was coming up riding some really dope street. And I mean, everyone, it was like so important to be a well-rounded skier. In my mind, it was like, you got to do it all, from the park to the pipe, to the POW, to the streets. Like that was what made you the best. And I'm like not thinking of a few people that I want to think of right now.
That happens, though. That happens, and that's okay. Do you think skiing has lost something with not having the well-rounded skier where it's very specialized now? Sure, there's guys that do a bunch of different things, but you don't see a dude competing in half-pipe and slopestyle anymore. I mean, that's a thing of the past.
Yeah, I know. It's just gotten to such a crazy level that it's almost too risky to pursue both. I mean, every time we're out there pushing ourselves, we're rolling the dice. So your odds of getting injured are a lot crazier if you're doing both. So it does suck to not have people doing both. And I think it'd be sick to do like an event where it's like you compete in all 3 and then there's like a overall skier like from that event. Do some shit like that to highlight people that can do it all. Because there are people that can do it all. It's just got to minimize risk a bit and hone in on one that you can maybe have more success in. But yeah, I think we are missing that like well-rounded skier these days. And then it kind of takes away from your ultimate love of the sport if you're just doing one thing all the time. Like that's why I quit half-pipe skiing. It felt like more of a job than
you're a
passion.
robot.
It's like, yeah, I just was like doing the same run every time. And like, I didn't want to learn dubs because I tried dubs when I was 13. I was trying dub flare and like land on the deck a couple times that day. And then I was like, screw that. Like, I don't want to do double corks. And I never wanted to train in the half pipe. It was just so scary for me.
Yeah. Falling 35 feet to flat sucks.
Yeah, for sure. And so I got a lot of respect for those guys. It's crazy what they do. But for me, it was like, I just had more fun doing these other things. So I decided to focus on that. And you can only do so much, I guess, right?
That's true. Well, at this point, we can only talk about so much, and we are done with this part of the podcast. But every podcast I do, I end with something called Inappropriate Questions. I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. This time, I was able to get someone who has a title that you don't have yet that you probably want. I'm talking about Olympic gold medalist Joss Christensen came up with 3 inappropriate questions for you. And Joss is a good friend of yours, so I think these should work out pretty well. I was happy with what Joss put together. Are you ready for question number 1 from Joss?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Colby, you've always been able to travel the world more or less on standby, seeing as your parents have worked in the airline industry. What is your craziest travel story or stupidest travel story while either leaving a big event or heading to a ski event?
I have a pretty good one, actually. It was between the South Korea test event, which would have been in 2016, and then we had a World Cup in Switzerland 2 weeks later. So McRae and Napes, Andrew Napes, 4x9 filmer, we went to Amsterdam. And we get to Amsterdam, we're, obviously checking out the coffee shops, like smoking some joints or whatever. Like, it was crazy just being in a place where that was like totally legal.
Yeah, when it wasn't legal here, that was a weird thing over there.
Yeah, exploring like such an amazing place, such an old city. And then those guys like went home in between, and I just ended up staying in Amsterdam. And yeah, as far as like the travel shit, like I met this Australian dude in a bar in Amsterdam that had a apartment near St. Moritz where the competition was, and he had his car there. And so I ended up just hitching a ride with him up there. And yeah, like I remember I was in this club in Amsterdam, and I was definitely not making the best decisions at this time, but I was just kind of partying. And like I said, I kind of felt invincible at that time. This was like 6 months before my car crash. And I remember I got my wallet pickpocketed in this club. Turns out this club is open 3 days straight. So I'm up for 72 hours in this club, just like trying to get my wallet or like find it. And then someone finally returned to the front desk. And I was just like checking the front desk, and just like, I didn't even know like time was going by differently. I don't know. I didn't process that it was 3 days, but I was awake for that long, and then ended up going to this World Cup. And I remember I was going into REM sleep. Like I missed a couple of days of training. Like I missed like the first day of training. So I showed up, I just had a little bit of training, boom, like qualified like third into finals at the Korvach World Cup. And I was like going into REM sleep while I was awake. My vision was like vibrating and I didn't know why. And I was like, what the hell? Like I'd like close my eyes and like shake it off, and then it would like go away. And then I researched later, like if you're sleep deprived enough, you can actually go into REM sleep while you're awake. And yeah, that was probably my craziest story with like travel.
And you got your wallet back.
Got my wallet back. No credit cards in it was the catch.
Well, at least you got your wallet back. That's nice.
Yeah, I got it back.
All right, we're going to go into question number 2.
My second question for you, Colby, would be, what would you say was the scariest or stupidest situation you've gotten yourself into while celebrating after a big win, either at X Games or anywhere else on the competition circuit?
Yeah, so after I won X Games in 2020, that was a crazy one because I'd won knuckle huck the night before and then slopestyle that next day. And then it was like the night of the monster party. So like I came home and like we were staying at the W with Monster in Aspen, which is a really nice hotel. And so they had like a bottle of Hennessy that I like went back with my homie, and we were just chugging some of the Hennessy. Like couldn't believe it happened that weekend. And it was my first X and stuff, and was like out at this little bar near there. And this is at like 7 p.m. Like, so the night was just getting started, and I had like 10 extra tickets to the monster party. I was basically given to some attractive girls at the time. And I remember like these 2 chicks from USC were like, yo, like, da 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 da. Like my homie's like, oh, you just won gold. They're like, no way. And then they're like talking about how horny they are and stuff. So we go back to the W, and I'm with these 2 chicks, and they're talking about a 3-way. And so I'm like, oh, this is nuts. And then we get back. It doesn't end up happening. And then we go to the monster party up the gondola, and like, you know, met a bunch of other people up there. And I mean, I was pretty much blacked out at the monster party. Like I don't remember a ton of it, but I know there was some funny moments of me like making out with some cutie like on the dance floor or something. Like, oh man, those were good times. And the following night was Sunday night, and we got to go in this place called the Esco Bar. And we had gone to dinner with the owner before all the events started. And he was like, hey, if you win gold, we'll do a champagne shower in my bar. And so all I had to do was take a photo of my gold medals and 2 bottles of Veuve Clicquot. And then we got to spray 20 bottles in this back room, and Joss was there. We were all wearing like ponchos, spraying, you know, these over $100 bottles of champagne on each other. It was ridiculous, dude. But cool memories, but something I would never normally do.
Oh man, to be in double X Games gold medalist at your first X Games and have your sponsor throw a huge party for whatever you want to do sounds like so much fun. Let's jump into your third and final inappropriate question.
Okay.
All right, Colby, my final question is, what's the most embarrassed you've ever been while hanging out with random people and other friends that are outside the ski industry, thinking that you were a big dog because you were a pro skier, but someone had no idea who you were?
Ooh. Funny enough, I just got back from California from this like Oakley Athlete Summit. And, you know, I totally was like fanboying over these surfers that were there. Like, you know, all the best Brazilians were there. Felipe Toledo, Gabriel Medina, like Italo Ferreira, like just superstars in their world. And, you know, with like Ishod Ware and like Louis Lopez, the skaters, and like Eli Tomac, the motocross racer, supercross. And just to be involved in that group of people was amazing. I obviously know like I don't have near the fan base that these guys do, and like they're just in a different world of like being celebrities essentially. But it was cool to like when I first showed up be like, holy shit, and try not to like fanboy over these guys too much, and then like by the end like being a little closer with some of them and sharing stories and like, you know, relating on our sports and like the differences and stuff, and talking about the similarities as well. And it was just a really cool experience. But yeah, it's like, it's pretty clear to me that like skiing, especially what we do, is such a niche sport. So, you know, we don't have near the super fans following that some of these sports do. And not to say that we don't have that as well, because we do. I love all my skier fans and everything, but it is an eye-opening thing when it's like, all right, like I'm Definitely a little further down the totem pole than these superstars.
I guess it's probably one of those things where maybe you're not asking those dudes for autographs, but you do want to get your picture taken with all of them.
For sure. Exactly. And just an honor to be supported by a brand that believes in me and has supported me for so long. So super cool, man.
Cool. We're going to talk about more about your brands and a bunch of other stuff in our next podcast, but that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast for this week. And normally I'd go into a long little outro of talking about how great you were and how awesome it was talking, and it was really awesome talking, but we still have another hour and a half that we're going to chat next week, so I'm not really going to do any outro here other than saying that the first half of your life has been pretty amazing, and we're going to get to where the accident is, and then we're going to talk about the second half, which is all success and crazy stuff, and I will say thank you for your time now, and I look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Appreciate all you do for the industry, too.
So that was time with Colby Stevenson, and what an incredible story so far, and what a fun personality that dude has. It's refreshing. It's like he's a throwback from the old days of skiing. Part 2 is even more entertaining, and it starts with another laugh-out-loud story. Until then, I want to thank you for listening and ask you to review me wherever you listen. It really does help the show grow, and I'm not going to lie to you. I sit in a little room and put so much love into creating an hour or so of entertaining podcasts for you each week. I don't miss weeks like every other podcast in action sports, and that's a struggle sometimes, and I'm going through some shit, but I take pride in never missing a week. But where am I going with all of this? Leaving a review really does make me feel good about myself and what I'm doing. While I'm usually fine without any pats on the back, I need them more than ever right now, and reviews not only make me feel good, they help me rise in the charts, so please do that. Thank you for that. Thank you for listening. And finally, please support the brands that make this show happen. They are Elon Skis, Outdoor Research, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Stanley, Best Day Brewing, and Rollerblade. Have a great week, everyone.